Okay, so welcome back to my channel. So we're just going to keep moving forward with Netflix series Ratched, Season 1, Episode 5, The Dance. But before I get into my recap, I just want to do a brief recap of yesterday's episode, Angel of Mercy Part 2. So we learned that Nurse Ratched and the admin had a sexual relationship in the past. We learned that, okay, obviously Briggs left her husband. We don't know if that's going to pop up, if that's going to rear its ugly head at some point in the future. I imagine it will. Dolly has agreed to be admin's sex buddy because she's crazy. The governor is still on Briggs' case to get Dr. Hanover to give him what he needs to proceed with the death penalty for Edmund. We learned that the front desk clerk at the hotel is crazy and she uses leeches to treat her arthritis. At the front desk, sitting there, just as bold as she could be, covered in leeches. Okay. Cartwright and Ingrid. That was a happy, I guess you would say it was a happy ending. They were, Ratched and Finnegan helped both of them to escape, and he actually took them to the nearest station so they could jump on a bus. So now they are able to be together. You know, we don't know if they're going to revisit that story at some point in the future, but at this point, they seem to be on their way to, I guess, making whatever life they can make with each other. Charles died a horrible death. He was first boiled and then shot. Unfortunately, Peter witnessed him being shot. Peter being the young boy who had the lobotomy, who was still a patient, obviously, at the hospital. So this poor child is even more further traumatized. Okay. Ratched just agreed to go on a date with Briggs, and Miss Osgood has decided to take a trip to Lucia after learning of Charles' death. So that is just a brief recap of what happened in episode 4. So if you are interested in hearing what I have to say for episode 5, The Dance, stay tuned. Okay, so after Nurse Ratched was able to get her hands on the file that Charles had on Dr. Hanover, she feels like now she has all the information and the evidence she needs to get him to bend to her will, which of course is to prevent them from executing Tolson. And so now she feels like she doesn't even have to play the game anymore. And so the episode opens with Hanover. He pulls up to a restaurant, and before going inside, he takes a hit of something. This time he snorts it. Okay. So he walks into the restaurant, and you see that he's there to meet Nurse Ratched. And basically, the bulk of their conversation is, I know where the bodies are buried, and you're going to do what I want you to do, or else. And the look on his face is almost priceless. You almost feel bad for him, but at the same time, it's like, dude, if you had a backbone to begin with, you wouldn't even be in this situation. And of course, one thing that she wants him to do is demote Nurse Bucket and make her head nurse. And so he obviously at this point has no choice.
You skimming bitch. Search yourself. And I think you'll realize it would be wise to do what I ask.
So poor Nurse Bucket, you know, the next day, she's called to his office, and she had left like this, he had this pastry on his desk, this eclair, and he's like, well, what is this? Just as nasty as he could be, right? And she was like, she's explaining what it is, and he puts his fist through it and basically was like, I am sick of these gifts and I am sick of you. I want your resignation on my desk immediately. And so she was like, I am not going to do that. And he basically told her, you are going to do that. Otherwise, I'm going to give you a piss poor reference, and it's going to be very difficult for you to find employment elsewhere. And so, the look, you could see like her heart broke into a million pieces if you could just see the look on her face. It was just so, she was just so devastated. And so the next scene, you see Nurse Ratched. She's giving a meeting. She's talking to the staff. Of course, Nurse Bucket is there. She's still employed. She's just been demoted. And she's talking about they're going to have this spring fling, and the governor and everyone is going to be there, and they want to see how, want him to see how the staff and the patients interact. All the while, it's doing like a flash between her giving the meeting and her talking to Tolson. And basically, she was like, once you get into this party, I want you basically to do whatever you can to convince everybody that you crazy as cat shit, so they can deem him unfit to stand trial. So, you know, they won't move forward with the execution. So after the meeting, Nurse Bucket, she's already in the break room and she's sitting there, and Nurse Ratched comes in and she puts a peach on the table. Now, if you remember a few episodes back, Nurse Bucket ate her peach and then they had this whole exchange. And so now, you know, to be the sarcastic, raggedy bitch that she is, she puts the peach on the table, and she was like, "This is for you." And so Nurse Bucket is like, "Well, you know what? Because I need this to work." She want the hospital to be successful. She want Dr. Hanover to be successful. She was like, "I am going to do my part, and you don't have to worry about me like backbiting you and all that whole thing. I'm going to do what needs to be done so that we can be successful." And so for some odd reason, Nurse Ratched was able to convince Nurse Bucket that Dr. Hanover had all these feelings for her, and you know, maybe that's why she was demoted, because he couldn't tell her because of her position, and that she thinks that she should ask Dr. Hanover to the dance, to the spring fling dance party, whatever they're going to have. And Nurse Bucket is just sitting there all gushing like some teenage girl, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, is she playing a role? Like, she really trying to feel Nurse Ratched out so she can kind of, you know, maneuver to get back into Dr. Hanover's good graces, or to try to really figure out what Nurse Ratched is all about, or is she really buying this? Okay, so in the next scene, you see Nurse Ratched. She goes to Dr. Hanover and was like, "Nurse Bucket is going to ask you to the spring dance. You need to say yes." And he just flat out, "I can't stand that woman. Why would I do that?" And I was like, "Oh Lord, Nurse Bucket, poor thing." And she was like, "You know, you're going to basically, I'm not asking you. I'm telling you that when she comes in here to ask you to go with her to this dance, you're going to go." And he's like, "Well, why are you doing this?" And this wench had the nerve to say, "You need to trust me," right? And so the next scene, you see a woman who is calling herself Undine Duquette, right? So you have this young man, he's playing his violin. It's like a park, or he's somewhere, and she is just heckling this man, telling him how crappy he is, and how she used to play for the Queen of England, and how his fingering and all this is crap. She's loud, and all these people are starting to stop and look at her. And then the next thing you know, she's sitting in Dr. Hanover's office. And she said some time ago, she started realizing she was having memory problems. She was like, she remembered being on the train, but not remembering how she got there. And, you know, she was, in another hospital, and they diagnosed her with melancholia. And then something interesting happened. Like, while they were talking, she started, she got extremely emotional, and then the personality of this child came out, and then all of a sudden there was this other, more aggressive, I don't know if there was supposed to be a male personality, so they eventually end up having to sedate her. And so Nurse Ratched is like, okay, he basically, once she calms down enough after he sedates her, he explains to her that she was misdiagnosed, and what she actually has is multiple personality disorder, and that he was very caring and concerned, like he's going to do what he needs to do to help her. And so as he was leaving the room, of course, Nurse Ratched ran behind him, and he was basically like, "You know what, just leave me alone. This is, it's going to be a very complicated case, but I need to focus on the best treatment for her, and I need to be left to do that." And she was like, "Oh no, I fully agree with that." And in her mind, she feels like if he's able, because she's such, at this point, she's such a rare and extraordinary case, that if Dr. Hanover is able to successfully treat her, then somehow that's going to make the governor forget that Tolson murdered 4 people in cold blood, and it's not going to be, and so the governor's no longer going to be out for Tolson's blood. Okay, so how she's come up with that, okay, I don't know how him treating her is going to make his constituents forget about the 4 murders, but that's where she is with her thinking at this point. So the next night, I don't know if it's the same night or the next night, Nurse Ratched is out on her date with Miss Briggs, and they start talking, and Miss Briggs let her know that the governor wants a resolution to the Tolson issue by the end of the month. And by a resolution, what he wants is whatever he needs to pursue the death penalty. And Nurse Ratched was like, well, I understand, and basically I'll let Dr. Hanover know. And Briggs was like, well, I have another question. Why did you want to come out with me? It seems like, before you were very certain that that's not what you were really into, or it wasn't something that you really wanted to do, but why are you here now? And Nurse Ratched was like, well, I'm going to be honest with you, and, I really don't want to talk about it any further. And she was like, well, I do have feelings for you, but I'm not exactly sure what that means. And Briggs started telling her about, how she understands, when she first, came to, understand herself and what she was attracted to. She had the same struggles, and she was in fact actually in love with a woman before who went off in the war, who was a nurse, but the woman never came back. And they kind of commiserated a little bit over that. And so in the next scene, you see this fancy car pull up, and who steps out? Mrs. Osgood with her damn pet monkey, right? So of course they pull up to the one hotel motel in town, and no crazy's behind the counter. And she goes to check her in, and she's looking at the room, and Miss Osgood is like, I wouldn't let my monkey stay here. And then she asked her about Mildred Ratched, and she, the lady told her where the Mildred's room was. She went and knocked on the door. Mildred was actually there, and she's like, you know what? I'm going to find more suitable accommodations, and so when I do that, I will reach out to you. So the next scene, they're at clearly a more upscale, nicer hotel. They're in the lobby, and they're talking. And Miss Osgood was like, clearly, I sent a man to do a woman's job. And she started asking her about, her relationship with Dr. Hanover. And Nurse Ratched revealed that he did tell me what happened about your son, with your son. And Mrs. Osgood, she started reflecting on, she admitted that her son was a handful, but there's one memory stuck out to her about, she was in the house and she started hearing this music, and she thought the music was so beautiful. And then she got closer, she realized that it was her son playing, and all she could do was focus on his fingers and how well, and perfectly he played the notes. And, that memory fuels her rage, because of obviously her son having no arms from the elbow down and no legs from the knees down. She's never going to have that experience again. And so she basically went to hire Nurse Ratched to kill Dr. Hanover, and Nurse Ratched agreed to do it, and she said for $1 million. And so of course Miss Hanover was kind of gave her a look, and of course Nurse Ratched was like, I know that's a lot of money, but I too have a family member that depends on me, and once I carry this out, then I'm not going to be able to provide for him, this person, in the way that I had once had, having been gainfully employed. And Miss Osgood got pissed off. She basically grabbed her arm and it's like, you're trying to take advantage of me. And she was like, no one takes advantage of me. And her facial expression was all distorted and contorted. And then you see Nurse Ratched looking at her with her eyes all bugged out. It's like, oh, okay. But I already knew she was crazy. So, okay, I don't know why I'm surprised. But Nurse Ratched even was taken back like, okay. And so the next scene, Nurse Bucket walks into, looks like the dining room or something, where Dr. Hanover is, I guess, working on his treatment for Mrs. Wells. Mrs. Wells, Charlotte Wells, I don't know if I said that in the before. Charlotte Wells is the woman who was calling herself Undie Ducat or something. Ducat. Her real name is Charlotte Wells. And so he's working on treatment for her. He has like this box with that that swirl, that spiral thing that they used to hypnotize people, and Nurse Bucket walks over and asks him to the dance, and he told her, yes, I would love to go with you. Is there any particular flower that you like? I guess it's a corsage or something. And she told him, and she said, oh, well, I will talk to you later. I'll leave you to do whatever it is that you're doing. And he explained to her that it's hypnotherapy, and he's working on, he's trying to figure out how he's going to help Mrs. Wells, and asked her if she would like to, if he could try it out on her, right? So she's like, oh, well, sure, of course. He could ask her to jump off a bridge. She would probably do that. She's so daggone ridiculous and desperate. Poor Nurse Bucket. I'm like, girl, he already told you to take your pastry and hit the road, and she's still working. But anyway, so she sits down in front of this daggone machine, and he's telling her about, doing that, oh, you're getting sleepy, and da-da-da, and, you're getting tired, and, then he tried to slide in, you're getting too tired to go to the dance, or, you're too tired to have me accompany you to the dance, or maybe you shouldn't go at all. And of course she was like, what are you talking about? I wouldn't miss that dance for the world. And so of course he realized it wasn't working. He got pissed. He was like, oh, this thing is not working. So he started putting this stuff in the box, and she was basically like, well, I'll see you. What time are you going to pick me up? He's just walking away. He didn't pay her no mind. And then she kind of twirls around and trying to do a little jig and waltzes away, right? So he's annoyed. He was really trying to hypnotize that woman tonight, so he wouldn't have to go with her to the dance. Okay. Okay, so Dolly, once again, she's taking Tolson his dinner. Of course, they start talking, and she tells him that she read his files about what he did to those priests, and then he was like, well, you probably think I'm a monster. And she said, well, no, I just, I read that, one of those men raped your mom, and and it's his fault that you have all this anger inside of you, and I have a lot of anger inside of me. And then she starts flashing this fantasy of them being able to run off together and be together, and he's like, look, I'm like, this chick is crazy. And he eventually tells her that he loves her, and that, the security guard is telling her, okay, nurse, okay, it's time for you to go. And then she eventually leaves. And so the next scene is Tolson in the shower. Nurse Ratched walks in, and he basically tells her his plan. He's like, I'm going to need something metal and sharp. So his plan is, I guess he's going to wait until everything gets, start popping off, obviously. And then he's going to cut himself and start speaking in tongues and just obviously start acting crazy. And she's like, okay, that sounds perfect. That sounds like a plan. Okay, so we go to Dr. Hanover now. Mrs. Wells is now in Hanover's office, and he's asking her permission to use hypnosis on her. And I guess the guy's name, the masculine personality, is named Apollo. And he basically like, this sounds like some what was the daggone word he used? It wasn't malarkey. I forget what term he used, but he was not. He's like, this basically sound like some BS. And he's basically, Dr. Hanover was like, this is gonna, really help you. And she finally gets her to, agree, and she sat down. And once she was able to calm down, he was like, I just want you to rest and just focus on your breathing, and just I want you to thank, it was baby Taffy, which is obviously the child, Apollo, which is the masculine personality, Undine Ducat is like this British socialite who, performed for the Queen, and then there's obviously, of course, the real Charlotte. And he said, I want you to thank, Apollo, baby Taffy, and Ducat, and I just want you to rest, and I really want to talk to Charlotte right now. And so the hypnosis worked, and he was trying to figure out, okay, so where did this trauma, how did this come about, what happened? And initially Charlotte was like, I don't want to say anything, because if I do, then the other personalities are going to get upset. Now, how she's aware of the other personalities, I thought that was that's news to me. I thought that when people who typically have multiple personalities are not aware of the other personalities or what the other personalities are doing. But he was like, no, this is a safe space. What happened? And she tells him that she was traveling to Maryland to this university. She was traveling late. She was basically attacked and kidnapped by 4 white men. They didn't sexually assault her, but they did beat her over the course of 9 days. They kept her locked up in her own feces. And she said it was one guy who really, didn't want to be a part of it. So she thinks that he was the one that called the police. And she said on day 9, the door opens. It was a police officer standing there. And he basically told her that he would help her if she agreed not to press charges. And she thinks that the police officer may have been the father of one of the boys. He gave her $5 and drove her to the bus station. And Dr. Hanover was basically like, once you wake up, you're going to remember what happened, but it's not going to have such a hold on you anymore. You're gonna basically let go of the trauma and the pain so that Charlotte can basically start to get her life back. And so he snaps his finger. She wakes up and she's like, well, how do you feel? And then she starts crying, and she said, I think she made the comment she felt free or light, or she basically, basically the gist of it is that she felt better. And so later that evening, when he was doing a recording and talking about her treatment, and he just broke down and started crying, and he was like, I helped her, I really was able to help someone. And so he got very emotional. So it was a very tough scene. Really, really tough scene. Okay, in the next scene, we figure out that, it's revealed that Louise, who was the woman who owns and manages the hotel motel, and Nurse Bucket are friends, right? So Louise goes over to Nurse Bucket's house for some cocktails, and she starts talking about asking Nurse Bucket about the book club, and how she got kicked out because she was an alcoholic and all kind of just a mess, right? And so, of course, Nurse Bucket is talking about this dance and how Hanover agreed to take her to this dance. And, she's just so excited because obviously we know what she's crazy about Hanover. And even Louise knows, like, oh, you've been crazy about him for forever. And she was like, I think it was the gifts that did it. So now she has this whole fantasy in her head that when she gave him that pastry, that he actually ate the pastry and he enjoyed it. And that those flowers that he said smells like a whorehouse in Manila, he loved it. And it was like, oh, it reminds me of my mother. And then she reveals why she wanted Louise to come by, because I guess Louise is good at dancing, so she wanted some pointers on dancing. But at this point, they're just basically just flailing around because they both drunk off their ass, right? And so as the night winds down, they're sitting on her porch, and Nurse Bucket is like, there are 2 things that I want in this world, and that's Dr. Hanover, and that's revenge, right? And she was like, Mildred Ratched. And of course, Louise is like, I can't stand that stuck up bitch. So they both have a bone. They neither of them can stand Nurse Ratched. And so the goal is, when they go to the dance, she wants Louise to go into Nurse Ratched's room to snoop around. So that's the plan, to find out whatever she can find out about Nurse Ratched. Okay, so Hanover, he's in the diner. He's having what looks to be lunch. He's just sitting there, and next thing you know, the door opens, and who walks in? Mrs. Osgood. And you can tell that this man is scared, like he is about to shit bricks, right? He is so terrified. So she sits at a booth in the corner, and he glances over, and all you see is she's sitting there, and she's already taken her fur coat off, and you see a puff of smoke, right? And then he kind of turns back around, and then he turns back. He hears the door open and close again, and he turns around, and she's gone. But the smoke is still, her cigarette smoke is still lingering, right? So the next thing you know, you hear banging on the door. He drives over to Nurse Ratched's hotel and saying that she's here, and oh my god, I can't believe she's here. And then for whatever reason, I guess at this point, since she know that they've both been party to 2 homicides, or at least covering them up at least. he decides he's having a nervous breakdown and saying that he's been self-medicating for years and how he can't handle it and da da da. And she tells him that he shouldn't be there, and what he should do is he should go back to the hospital and he should tell the security guard that he's being threatened by a former patient and that he's going to be staying in his office for a while for protection. Okay, so he leaves, and so the next day, Nurse Ratched goes over to Miss Osgood. It looks like, did she get an apartment or something? Because they're decorating. So, and she's like, asking her, what were you thinking? He saw you, da da da. And basically, she tells her that, she tells Nurse Ratched that she's been walking around with a gun in her purse, right? But she had to think about her son. Like, she is his only and primary caregiver. Like, she has to do everything for him, and she can't afford to go to prison. And she can't be implicated in, any type of criminal activity. And so she told Nurse Ratched, I'll give you $100,000 and nothing more. And so Nurse Ratched agreed. Okay, so we're back at the hospital, and Nurse Ratched goes down to speak with Tolson, and basically like, okay, they're coming up with this plan, right? So she said, telling him that they're going to bring you up around 8. They're going to take the shackles off, and they're going to do a sweep of the room first to make sure there are no metal objects or sharp objects. And I want you to be ready to put our plan in motion. So, and now it's the dance. This is what we've all been waiting for. This is when all the ish goes down. Okay. So, Dr. Hanover is sitting with Miss Wells initially, and then the security guard comes over. What was his name? Lord, what's the daggone security guard's name? He came over and he asks Miss Wells to dance. And so she gets up and they go and dance, and Dr. Hanover he's just sitting there, and of course Nurse Bucket walks over and she was like, this is your third glass of punch, I really want to cut a rug. So he eventually gets up and they start dancing, and eventually he's so uncomfortable he excuses himself, he walks off the floor. She walks over and starts talking to get some more punch. Mildred is, I guess she's the punch person at this point, and Nurse Ratched asks Nurse Bucket about Dolly. Had she seen Dolly? And she was basically like, that's not my issue anymore. You're the head nurse. I'm just focused on being with my man, right? Because at this point she drunk off her ass, right? And of course Nurse Ratched knows that that's just a whole facade, so she kind of had this little smirk on her face, right? And of course Miss Briggs is there, and so they kind of made eye contact briefly. And so you see Dr. Hanover, he goes back into the medication room and he shoots up, rips his jacket off, and he shoots up. So after he finished getting his little high on, he goes back out onto the dance floor, right? And you can see his eyes are bugged out. He is high off his ass, and he forgot he didn't even think or remember to put on his jacket. So now he's just out there, his shirt and his vest or whatever. And Nurse Bucket goes over and she wants to do the Charleston. He goes to sit down and she goes to get him to do the Charleston, right? So Nurse Bucket, no, actually, is this before? So, okay, so so before he came back, Nurse Bucket went to get some punch, and so at this point Miss Briggs is over by the punch, and Miss Briggs starts asking her questions like, well, why are you here? She was like, oh, we haven't met, and they shook hands, and she was like, well, why are you here? And she was like, oh, I'm here, I accompanied Nurse Ratched. And Mildred kind of made this face like, oh, really? So why are you here? She's like, oh, I'm a chaperone or something. And Nurse Bucket's like, a chaperone? That's interesting. So while they're talking, Nurse Ratched is over talking to Tolson, because at this point they brought him up, they took the chains off, he's now seated at a table, and she told him where the razor was that she hid. And so that's when Nurse Bucket goes over to Dr. Hanover to dance, and now he's up doing the Charleston. His eyes are so bugged out his damn head, it looks crazy. Dolly walks in, she walks straight over to Tolson, and while everybody else is avoiding him, she walks right over to him, no shame, pulls him out on the dance floor. They all dancing all close, hugged up like they old lovers, right? And he's like, okay, are you ready? You know, they're talking about their plan. Like, okay, well, what the hell? What's this plan? What's about to go down? So at this point, Nurse Ratched and Miss Briggs, they're standing off to the side, and they're kind of sort of touching hands, but of course they can't be obvious about it. And Miss Briggs is like, we should be out there dancing, but of course you know they can't do that. And so Finnegan, he walks over to Nurse Ratched and asks if, you know, she would like to dance with him, and of course he agreed. And so they're out dancing. Nurse Bucket is all over Dr. Hanover, and he is just getting sick of it. And he basically tells her, that is it. I have had enough. I loathe you. The only reason you are still here is because the previous owner liked you for some reason, and I agreed that I wouldn't fire you. If you ever talk, don't ever talk to me again. If you ever talk to me again, I'm basically going to knock the shit out of you. He said he would strike her in the face, but same thing. So of course she runs off the floor, because at this point she's humiliated. She's embarrassed, right? And so Nurse Ratched is dancing close by, so she goes over to grab Dr. Hanover. He pulls away because he's like, basically he said, I'm tired of women telling me what to do, and he just didn't want to hear anything else, right? So he pulls away, and Miss Briggs walks over to Nurse Ratched. She was like, is somebody going to go after her? Like, if you don't, I will. So she goes after Nurse Bucket to see if she was okay, and of course eventually they all three end up in the bathroom. Nurse Ratched is like, I don't, you know, you shouldn't let him get to you like that, you know, you're stronger than that, where's the compacts, and they want to fix her up. And she was like, basically, like, you know, like, it was all a fantasy, it was all in my head. And she was like, and deep down I knew it, I knew that he didn't care for me the same way that I care for him, but you know, she I guess couldn't help herself, I don't know. So Nurse Ratched goes to confront Dr. Hanover, and basically he tells her that he is sick of her sick of people telling him what to do, that he is actually her superior, and he's not taking any more orders from her. And she basically leans down and basically lets him know that you are greatly mistaken. And she walks off. And then the next you know, all the shit hits the fan. Tolson now has this razor. The security guard is still dancing with him as well. So his back is turned. So Tolson walks over to him, slit his throat. Dolly takes his gun. She's like waving now. She got the gun pointed on people. Mrs. Briggs come out, and she's trying to tell, you know, Dolly to calm down. Dolly ends up shooting Miss Briggs in the chest. I don't know if she was shot in the chest or the shoulder at this point. Obviously people are rushing to help the security guard and Mrs. Briggs. They run out, jump in the car, and they pull off. And so by the time the police find the vehicle, they are long gone, and the gun, the security guard's gun, is left in the seat. And that's how this episode ends. So now Dolly, they're supposed to be what, Bonnie and Clyde? Oh, child, she done threw her whole life away. But, I mean, should we be surprised? I don't think so. But yeah, that's how this ended. I am going to leave this here, and I will see you guys in the next episode.